Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Big Mike here.
Jason.
Hey, there he is. Hey, if you were with us last week, and we talked about why we joined the military, and we kind of moved up into the MEP station, which is where the recruiters take you to do your physicals and stuff like that. That's where we're going to start, and then we're going to get into boot camp, and we're going to get into basic training. And what is the difference? Because there is a difference, okay? And so before we do that, we want to say hello to everybody in the chat. So there's Rambling with the Brooms there in here. Let's see, James Hall, how you doing, brother?
Let's see, Melinda Dobson, hello.
Hey, I see a Chair Force guy, Grumpy Grandpa Patriot Show. Oh, and
I'm once again not alone.
We got a tongue lashing from an Air Force person because we called them Chair Force, and the hotel comment I made. And I did comment back and I said, hey, being veterans or being in the military, you're like one big family. You know, you can joke on somebody, but nobody else can. So I hope my answer to that person from the Air Force or Air Force vet, her and her husband were at the same time. So there's no malice behind anything we say about the other branches and stuff like that. And if you're brave enough, if you're from the Navy or the Air Force or what was that other Coast Guard, you're more than welcome to contact us and come up on the show and defend your branch. So yeah. So anyway, hey, there's Adventure America's in here.
And I see I got a fellow jarhead. Devil Dog made it in.
There he is. There's your neighbor over there, Tilted K.
There's Eric and Missy. It's like I just talked to him a few minutes ago.
There you go.
Okay.
Hey, Glenn and Shannon, Salty Life.
Jerry over at Butler Family Farms.
Yeah. A Navy man. Yeah, Butlers. Hey, Trina Rock. Wouldn't that be cool to have the last name Rock and be in the Army or the Marine Corps and they called you Sergeant Rock? Wouldn't that be awesome?
We actually when I got to my first duty station, there was a guy, his last name, when I first got there, he was corporal, but his last name was Sergeant.
Oh, really? Corporal Sergeant.
So, you know, it was always like Corporal Sergeant, and then it got real fun when he picked up Sergeant. So then it was Sergeant.
There you go. Yes, Sergeant.
Yeah. And he wasn't a small guy either. So you were like, you didn't really want to talk a lot of smack to him. Like, luckily, he was pretty cool and chill, and you could get away with it because, I mean, he was getting towards the latter part of he did like his 4 years and got out. But he was getting towards the end of his contract, and I was like just coming in, you know, with my group of guys from MOS school. And yeah, you start, you know, there was, what was the other one that we gave a lot of? There was one, his last name was Hickey.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Man. Hey, there's Melinda Dobson.
See, we're getting them. So Ricky Smith is on it. Jason's just the lower form of the Navy. Men's department.
That's because they pay you. And that's why they had to take the hand-me-down tanks from the Army because the Navy was too cheap to buy new shit.
Oh, it was, you know, as I got later on in my career to where it was like more involved in kind of understanding budgeting and stuff like that, I was like, how do we do anything? Like compared to, you know, kind of like we talked to our brethren in the Army where they're like, oh man, we just buy blah, 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 blah. And we're like, yeah, no, we can't do that. Like we have to keep like repainting things to make them look new.
Yeah.
It was, I think the only time that I seen kind of an unrestricted budget was when I was in an engineer battalion, and it was a concept vehicle. So it was new to the Marine Corps, and it was actually the only one of the only or very few vehicles that the Marine Corps got before the Army got fielded theirs.
Right.
And I found out very much why it was much better. Let the Army do their thing and pay for all the good stuff and have things, all their ducks in a row before they gave it to us, because yeah, it was a show. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what we say in the military when everything is, instead of food bar, it's just a shit show.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, so hey, there's Debbie Drock.
Yeah. So there's Trina Rock says, yeah, dummy equals rock in the Marines. It does. Like, that's when we had the real special Marines that I'm pretty sure were ASVAB waivers. We'd give them a rock and make them carry it around. This is your ID card. Make sure you have it all the time.
Yeah. So there's Grace and Fire. Yeah. Oh, her and Terry's having a conversation. So anyway.
Nice.
Because she said she was there to represent the Dependopotamus.
Oh, okay. The Pendopotamuses. Okay. So, hey, where we left off, I did get a email from somebody, and they didn't say they wanted to be on the show, but they said, hey, are all the oaths of an enlistment the same throughout all the branches? And the answer to that is yes, they are, except for the officers. They do theirs when they get commissioned, and they have a commissioned oath that they do. But when you get to the MET station and now here for me, it was a total shock in the head when you're in there with all these guys and you're in your skivvies, your shorts, or your underwear, or your tidy whities, or in my case, the guy in front of me had a leopard Speedo looking underwear, and I felt really uncomfortable next to the guy. So it was, you go up there and they take you up there, you do your ASVAB, they take you up there again when it's time for your physical. Now, the physical, if you're shy, this is not the time to find out that you're shy about being around a bunch of other naked people and some of the things that they do to you by cupping and coughing. Bend over and grab your ankles. Well, that was a new experience for me altogether, and I didn't like it at all.
Well, so being young, like, I mean, mind you, when I did the initial physical, I had just turned 17. Yeah, I think it was my 17th birthday. So I'm 17 years old going through all of this stuff, and no confidence, no self-esteem, nothing like this. So you go in and you're stuck in this. But I played sports, so to be in a room of other men, showering, getting changed, doing those types of things wasn't an unusual occurrence. The problem was when we came to the physical and the whole, hey, turn your head and cough and cupping.
Yeah.
It was a female doctor.
Oh, really?
Yes.
And I had a hairy-knuckled Italian guy grabbing mine.
No,
I didn't feel comfortable at all.
There was some of us trying to like switch lines and watch like which room you went so that we wouldn't have to go. And the joke was on us because the doctors, we didn't pay attention. They were just playing round robin as to where anybody was. So it was like, we don't want the female. Like this is not the place to go in there and be coming out with, your manhood standing out in front of everybody. And but luckily it was like there was just so much going on. You didn't have a time to really think of it in that manner. But it was just like, man, this is a little uncomfortable.
So they do all this stuff. They do a full physical from top to bottom, opening your mouth, looking in your eyes, looking in your ear holes, looking at the six point of contact area, cupping, looking at your feet, making sure you're not flat-footed, making sure you don't have any deformities, all this stuff, and they write it all down. and you're carrying your chart around from station to station, getting everybody to sign off on it and everything. Then you're all done. You get dressed back again, and then they take you into the room. Okay. And you're all in formation in the room and everything. And they have you swear in and take the oath of enlistment. So the oath of enlistment is, I state your name, and you'd say your name. You solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I will obey the orders of the President of the United States and the orders of the officers appointed over me according to regulations and the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So help me God. One thing that I'm surprised in this woke age is that they still leave the word God in that, and they've left it in there. And I'm proud of them that they didn't take that out. Now, and they explain to you, God can be any higher deity above yourself that you worship, and that's who you're swearing in by. So it could be a number of people that people call God. So people don't want to get wrapped around the axle that I'm not a Christian, I might be Muslim, it's whatever you perceive that God to be in your life. So that's the oath of enlistment. Once you're done with that, I know for me, they were supposed to put me in a hotel, but I came up the next day because I was a rush recruit and I didn't make it. I was late. I took a Greyhound back to Mesa, got on the motorcycle and took off, and rode all the way across the United States to go to boot camp. But I don't know how that was for you, how they processed you over there with the Marine Corps. I guess the MEPS is the MEP.
MEPS is MEPS. So
Yeah.
And so being I was in Michigan, our MEPS for Michigan is in Lansing. So
Okay.
that was a couple-hour drive, from where I grew up. So I actually, and I'd seen Devil Dog had mentioned it, I DEP'd in, delayed entry program.
Yeah.
Kind of like what we talked about last time. And so I actually swore in twice. I swore in the first time when I DEP'd in, and I did my ASVAB, an initial physical, not the full on, one you get right before you leave for boot camp.
Right.
And then just basically went over the whole contract. I did a lot of my contract, making sure that I got assigned the right MOS category and those types of things. And then, but that was, I think that wasn't overnight, because I stayed, he dropped me off and I stayed in a hotel that night and then got up the next morning and did it. So then when I went to MEPS the second time, so now for me, that was almost 10, 11 months. It went by. I graduated high school. Then the recruiter takes you back to MEPS, and that's where you do basically what you were just talking about, was you're finalizing any paperwork that you didn't have done, but then you're doing the full on, the duck walk, the physical, I don't think they didn't give us any shots or nothing there. I don't think. But they were double checking everything. And then for me, we got done with that and put me on a plane. And I flew to San Diego, California. And then you get off from there, and it's kind of a blur for me because I didn't properly prepare going to boot camp that day. But so we got on the plane and went straight there, and then they get you on a bus at the airport. Like, they have them waiting for you, and then you get on the bus. But it's always, the Marine Corps is always very strategic that you come in at like 0:30. So it's 2, 3 in the morning. It is very dark. You have no orientation of what's going on, and just let the journey and joy begin.
Yeah. Oh my God. So what do you guys call that? They call it drop day. is that's when you get to the reception station and everybody's so freaking nice. All the civilians, when I came in, they were nice and they said, okay, I was sitting on the couch and blah, blah, blah. And then, everybody in this room, we need you to come with us. And they put us in a classroom, and these 3 psychotic sons of bitches came in and they just started in on us and stuff like that. And, I mean, it was like, if you came from a family that talked nice to each other, this is a mind screw to the 3rd degree. You know, if you came from a family where parents actually talked nice and said please and thank you, and everybody got along, this right here would probably give you a heart attack, you know, at 18 years old. Okay.
Oh,
because they started in. Now, remember, I came in 1979. All the drill sergeants were from Vietnam. Okay. And I'm 63 years old, and I know my drill sergeant's name still to this day, more so than I know past friends' name if I seen him on the street. Okay. Mm-hmm. In fact, Drill Sergeant Martin is a friend of mine on Facebook.
Nice.
Okay? Yeah. And he remembers me because I threw my duffel bag and hit him dead in the chest getting off the bus because the back door. So anyway, Drill Sergeant Martin, Drill Sergeant Williams, and what was that crazy guy's name? Now I forgot his name. I was just thinking about him 10 seconds ago. See, that's what happens when you get old, okay? And you've got life PTSD. Anyway, Hackenberry, that guy was the most psychotic person I've ever seen or been around in my life. I don't think he could put a sentence together without 10 cuss words. You know what I mean? And he just, every time he looked at me, it's like, I always thought he's looking at me just to come into my face, because I'm 6'4", and he's 5'6". And so he hated it. Anybody tall, you were his target. Okay. Because he had to go like this and look at you. He hated it. You don't know how many holes I had in my fatigues by getting on my knees so he could look down at me and yell at me. That's how it all started off. And all the tall people were in his platoon, 3rd herd. That's where you went. He wanted all the tall guys. And it was crazy. They just started in on you. And I don't care I don't know. Back then I was saying, how does he know my eyeballs moved? He was behind me, and all of a sudden they're screaming in your ear. And then, you know, you file for disability, and it started in basic training. Come on. That's where it started.
Yeah.
And it never stopped. And we went from that room, and they were chest bumping you and moving you and stuff. I don't think they can even touch you nowadays. I don't know.
I don't imagine. I don't think they're allowed to cuss at them nowadays.
Oh my gosh. I mean, that's where I perfected the art of cursing, was in boot camp, because they were crazy for the entire 10 weeks. I mean, absolutely insane on us. And then 3rd platoon, they took us all to get our uniforms, our boots. They got everything. You got your duffel bags and you're dragging all this stuff. I'm not going to wear all this crap, I'm thinking, but they give it to you for a reason. Okay. Number one, to make your life hard on day one. Okay. And then follow on from that is to make everything nice, neat, tidy, squared, everything in your locker at all times, like you've never took anything out of there. Because if you take a pair of fatigues out of there to wear, now you've got to go back and you've got to move all your hangers so it's perfectly measured throughout your entire thing, your crest plate, all that stuff that's in there. roll your sock. I mean, they taught us everything. I didn't know you rolled socks. I thought you got socks. You just cupped them in on the end and threw them in a drawer. But you have to roll and tuck your socks individually so you could take them out. And hell, I tried to wear the same socks a couple of days in a row so I didn't have to go back there and move all my socks and keep everything freaking straight, you know? So that was that. But one of the things that people don't understand is I thought that was the worst of it, was day one. But then they took us from there, put us, they call them, what do they call those? Cattle trucks, where you get in them and you have to stand up in it and then it drives all over the place and you get done and everybody's got bruises because they don't slow down and stuff like that. And so we got to Echo 10, 10th Military Police Battalion, OSIT, one station training there at Fort McClellan. And then, of course, you got how many people? You got 50 people on a cattle car trying to get out at the same time. And so you get out there and they're telling you to fall in. And you don't know what the heck is fall in. I don't know what this word means. You know, get in formation and everybody, I mean, it looks like a gaggle of ducks, right? And then they just keep yelling at you and stuff like that, knocking stuff out of your hands. And then you're in the front lean and die position for the longest time. I go, front lean and die? What is that? I found out real quick the first time, when you're in the front lean and rest position, in the push-up position for 10 minutes or more, it sinks in real quick what that is. And you never want to get into that position again. And then if you raise your butt like a camel, you get a clipboard on it to get it straight again. I'm sure everybody's gone through that in the military. Well, back then you did. And then we find out that although this is where the headquarters for 10th Echo Company is, they have a 3200 area on, and these were nice. These were brand new barracks back then when they built them. Brand new. Air conditioning, everything. Then they said, grab your stuff. So we had, rucksack on the back, rucksack on the front. You're holding it. And we're running over to the 3200 area of the installation. That's the old basic training area. They're all wooden barracks. Rats live over there. It is a absolute shithole. I'm sorry. And we had to run over there. It's 3.5 miles to that thing. So every time we got up, every single morning, we had to run all the way over to the main area for PT. We already run, there's 3 miles down. So we got to participate in, morning PT and stuff. And then we had to run all the way back. That's another 3 miles. We had to shit, shower, and shave, get all that stuff done, and then run back for chow. That's another 3 miles. And then drills start that same day. So that was my first 2 days, the yelling, the getting of equipment, the running, clipboard to the backside. I don't know how many times, because I was a skinny kid, man. I didn't have nothing. I could do push-ups and stuff, but not at the frequency they wanted me to do them at.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But by the end of it, really quick,
I got
the
pretty
lightest
good
of objects become really
Yeah.
heavy holding them in one position for a long time.
Oh, dude. And then they came out with one, they introduced us to a thing called the Ranger thinking position. That's when you're not up on your hands, but you're on your elbows like this. And you can't touch your chin. Dude. So I don't know how drop day or whatever you guys call it in Marine Corps.
Yeah, I don't know. We just called it Hell Day, really. So I want to put a precursor to some of the events and how they happened in the first couple days of my boot camp experience. May or may not be a little fuzzy, because anybody thinking about joining, do not go to boot camp. Doesn't matter what branch you're in, hungover. not a good plan. So we decided it was a great idea. I knew that morning that my recruiter was going to pick me up I knew the morning he was going to pick me up, take me to MEPS. From that point at MEPS, I was going to do all that final physical stuff and get on a plane, and I'm flying to San Diego. So some friends of mine, I had helped moved into an apartment, and we decided we were going to have a housewarming party / me going away party. I woke up on the floor, half underneath the bed, not knowing where I was, what was going on. Knew I had a time I got to go meet and I was feeling rough. I thought, well, I've got this flight, going across. That didn't help any. So you get on a bus at the plane terminal in San Diego, and there's no peace and quiet from that point on. You are getting yelled and screamed. And then once you pull into, and a lot of people have all seen that video, and then that's the truth of it, is they pull you up, and it's always at dark. You come in, and then they come up on the bus, and they yelling and screaming at who they are and what you're about to do. And then you go piling off the buses and get on the yellow footprints, and you just stand there, and then they'll start filing you off. And, but it's standing there, and there's at least a dozen, if not more, drill instructors that are running around in between, because the yellow footprints basically have put you in formation. You just don't know it's a formation yet.
Yeah.
But it's enough room that they can go in and out of there like ants, and they are like fire ants, just pissed off, just yelling and screaming, and you're not sure, should I breathe? When is it okay to blink? Just I had to revert back to my uncle telling me, don't volunteer for anything and just be the best statue you could be. And so I just stand there like, don't make direct eye contact, and they start filing you in, and it's you rush through, you get like the paperwork, or it starts off, you have what is it, like the amnesty period, right? So yeah. But you're already looking at probably out of several hundred individuals, which in our case it was all, it's all men. So you're looking at several hundred men out here, and a good third of them are already in tears in one way, shape, or form. They have no idea what's going on. So you go into the amnesty period. Of course, they tell you, hey, this is your last chance to back out if you want to, or did you bring anything you shouldn't have brought? And, you can tell the ones that their recruiters didn't really set them up very well, because they showed up with all kinds of stuff they weren't supposed to have.
Yeah.
And, I think I had my order papers and maybe my wallet, because I needed my ID card and that kind of stuff. And that was it. Like, I knew, don't bring anything with you, because you're not going to get any of it anyways. And so you go through and they pack all this stuff away, and then you're moving from one spot, getting a brief about, hey, we're about to fill out this paperwork. And next thing you know, you're getting a bank account, which for me was really weird, because I had never had a bank account.
Yeah.
I didn't need one. Everything that I did up until that point in my life, like I had cash, so I did something for somebody, they pay me cash. But in order to get, because by the time I came in, now, mind you, this is where obviously a lot of people realize that I'm much younger. So I went in, this was in 98. And so they had went to automatic direct deposit for your paycheck. You weren't getting a paper copy check. It was all direct deposited. And so we had to fill out the form. Like, if you didn't have a bank account with information for your routing number already, then, well, they have a local Marine Corps bank right here. Guess what? You're going to have that bank account now. And it just shuffles from like one office. Like, you don't sit for very long. I think the oddest part was, while we were waiting for them to get like others, because they would kind of take you in groups, we did sit in this auditorium waiting for our next brief, and they'd actually turned the lights off, and they're like, just sleep for a few minutes, which of course you couldn't because you didn't know what was going on, and was like, yeah, fall asleep. That's a good plan. So we just sat in a dark room for probably, I don't know, it felt like forever. It was probably 10 or 15 minutes. But at that point, like everything around you is moving fast, but your brain is on reverse. You're like, it's, you know, time is not even relevant. And then they rush you through to get all your uniforms and all your issue. And that's where you get, you know, your packs. Like we got a pack and a sea bag. And so then it was like, all right, now you got to start carrying this stuff and you get fitted. You're running through and, hey, you're this size. All right, fine. Put it on. Does it fit? I don't know. Well, that's your size. Keep going. And, you know, you finally end up where you get broke down into your platoons to go to your squad bay. There was no couches, and we were in California, but there was no air conditioning. And this would have been August. So it was kind of that cooling off time anyways. And then you get into your platoon and it starts like, all right, this is, you know, and you kind of, you know, talked about it a little bit. I was shocked more at how they had to dumb down everything. You know, like I had been doing my own laundry for a while. I, you know, done this stuff but not to the military standard that a shirt is folded a certain way. It goes on a hanger a certain way.
Yeah.
And I think the only thing that we had hung up, because we didn't have wall lockers. So we had a foot locker, and then your dress uniforms, I think for a while they hung on the rack, but then we were able to move them back on some other, like they put up some poles or something, and we could move just the dress uniforms. Everything else, but it had to be folded, and then it went into your foot locker, and then, you know, you had your one, what was it, your personal items bag, but it's supposed to stay sealed. You never get into it, and that goes in there. But then everything else is like, it's got a place and a location within the foot locker with your two little trays. And yeah, it starts of, now we did a thing, they called them the skivvy roll. So you took your t-shirt and of course folded it, laid it out, and then you would take your socks and then take your skivvies, and then you roll, but you leave part of the sock out, and then you roll it all up, and then the top of the sock actually wraps over top of it. So you end up with, you know, shirt, socks, and underwear in a ball about that big.
Yeah.
And that's how you kept your stuff that way every day. When you would need to go hygiene, you grabbed that in a hygiene bag, and you had everything, because going around everywhere in your underwear was just the normal. And then a really weird, I guess, a transition and that they had started doing because they found people were getting a lot of feet problems was your first couple weeks, I think, first week or two, because our boot camp is 13 weeks.
Yeah.
So it's actually the longest boot camp out of all the branches. But it's like the first week, 2 weeks, I think it is, you're actually in tennis shoes. They call them Go Fasters, your running shoes. They don't even let you wear your boots yet.
Really?
And I think a lot of it was because of the running and the moving around and doing this. They had you in shoes to help you get acclimated, because, you know, ultimately, no matter what branch you're in, the whole idea and concept, right? And that's why they do, you know, we refer to it a lot as the shock and awe, right?
Yeah.
They want you to have that shock and awe, and they show you the simplest things. We kind of talked about it last week, was like, you know, the first time I seen an Asian guy shaving, and he was doing it backwards because he's never had to shave in his life. But they literally gave you a class on how to shave.
That's right.
They gave you a class on how to, you know, I just thought, hey, tie your boots. No, there's a proper and an improper way of lacing your boots and lacing your shoes and tying them, and, you know, putting a shirt on and hanging something on a hanger. And it comes down to the nitty gritty because they want to break you down, and I think a lot of that kind of going back to where we started the night off was the oath, right?
Right.
And how do they still have God? Your version of God is what your version of God is, but they leave God in there because at the end of the day, when it comes to the military, it's all one fighting force. You're all there serving one purpose and one reason, and that's to defend the Constitution and our country.
Right.
And so, all of the other outside stuff, that's for you on your personal time. Like, don't, like, you can have that and you can believe that. But ultimately, and that's, I found, I guess, really early on in boot camp was physically, for me, physically, it was a joke. It really was. Like I came out of boot camp doing less pull-ups than when I went in, but I had worked out a lot, prepping myself to go. And and even the running thing, like I hated the formation runs because I had to short step. You're in a formation run. Everybody's left foot has to hit the ground at the same time. Well, being, even though I'm, 6 foot, but the guy leading it is 5'5" or 5'6", so his legs are shorter, and you have to run at their pace, and it ends up being, for me, it was basically half step running, and it was horrible.
Well, in the Army, we call that the airborne shuffle, and that's why you see I know I can speak for the Army. You go out to PT and you see guys with skinny legs and these gigantic calves. And I still have them, right? You have these gigantic calves, and that's from that airborne shuffle that they do because you can only move as fast as your slowest man. And they teach it and they drill it into your head that's why we do it. Because you heard people go, man, why don't we run a little bit faster? This is killing me. Then 13 weeks later, 10 weeks later, whatever your boot camp is, hey, it's a piece of cake. Now they've just conditioned your body to move at a certain pace, but the whole point of it it's not a sprint, it's a run. And I when I did that, I mean, my legs, because I was over there running cross country and I was lean, mean, I could run. And that absolutely, I mean, I had shin splints for days.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Because we ran in boots. I didn't see a pair of tennis shoes. PT test was in boots. Everything was in boots. And I'm just like going. And then I find out later on that the number one reason for drops in the history of the Army is foot problems.
Mm-hmm.
And I know now that they run in tennis shoes and stuff because I worked on Fort Leonard Wood and I watched. I was in these clowns running in tennis shoes. What? And then I was talking to a guy. He goes, yeah, we had to. That was congressionally mandated because the VA was paying so much out for people's feet, and your drop rate was so high because of people's feet. Yeah. It wasn't your back, it wasn't your shoulders from push-ups. It was your feet that's carrying that.
Well, and I think the hard part, and that's why you end up with a lot of veterans that have feet, knees, leg, and even the back because of the impact.
Yeah.
Is now we did everything in boots after that first couple weeks, other than like say formation runs. If every morning you got up, you did PT, and then you if you were in PT gear, then you had your tennis shoes on and you ran.
Yeah.
But when you were in your utilities and going from place to place, and all of a sudden you need to get there fast, or they would have designated what we call boots and utes runs, where you're wearing you take your blouse off, so you got a t-shirt on, but you got your cami bottoms, and we did that probably a lot more, obviously, while I was in active duty. But that was a big, even in the once they transfer to the fleet, right? They're done with boot camp. They made it through boot camp. Now they get to go to the fleet. they would do a lot of the boots and utes, but even the running. And you know, even Tara gives me crap now, you know, because I'll have so many different pairs of shoes. But you
Yeah.
had to, like, especially as you know, as we got older and we're in longer, was if you were running every single day in that same pair of tennis shoes, you're just causing so much damage and it hurts. Like, so you've got to spend.
Yeah,
So I
you
mean,
broke those down quick.
yeah, and it was nothing for me to go drop $100-$200 on a pair of running shoes, and I was lucky to get a couple months out of them. And so, you know, I tried to do a rotation where if I bought new shoes, those were my ones for running, and then when they broke down, those would become my everyday like yard shoes or going out because I had to buy another pair, and that pair was only for running.
Yeah.
And trying to get around in those, but and you're on the asphalt, you know.
Yeah.
So for us, you know, like going to San Diego, it's all asphalt or there's sand pits.
Right.
I think there was one area out there that was a big PT field, but it was sand. I mean, it might as well have been 80 grit sandpaper when you're down on it. But everything else it's all asphalt. You're constantly on the asphalt. And that's where we talked a little bit before we came up. One of the things I was going to bring up too about being in San Diego. And so I'll get this part out there. Yes, I'm a Hollywood Marine. There's only two versions of Marines. Your Hollywood or your Paris Island. But the MCRD San Diego is right at San Diego International Airport. There's just a fence with concertina wire and stuff separating the depot from the airport.
Yeah.
And so you have the airport constantly planes taking in and off. I mean, just messing with your mind, you know, of the psychological aspect of boot camp, which is probably the more demanding than it is physical.
Right.
You know, that psychological needing to break you down, you know, so then you've got an airport of watching people taking in and off going, man, if I could just get out of an airplane to get out of here. And then you look to the other side going up the mountain and there's homes, you know, people out there barbecuing and it's smack dab in the heart of town. Like, there's no isolation whatsoever to be able to take your mind away. So those drill instructors are there to just keep your mind focused because, like I said, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what branch you're in. From your day one to your day end, graduation day, the amount of change that goes through your body and your mind. But it creates, I mean, to see a platoon of, what did we graduate? My platoon, I think we ended up having like maybe 85-ish, maybe like between 80 and 85 somewhere. Because I remember my number was 83, and being, you know, my last name White, I'm at the end of that list. And there was, I think, 2 or 3 other guys beyond me, but I know we had a couple medical drops and that kind of stuff. You know, but 80 individuals in a formation that can step their foot at the same time and make a turn at the same time and, you know, move rifles around, and there's not anybody out of sync. Like I don't know. I mean, I guess a simple way is, it's brainwashing, but it's making you focus on that end goal of we all, you know, and kind of going back to the formation runs. It doesn't matter how fast, like, congratulations, you were able to get to that from point A to point B faster than me, but now you're just standing there waiting because you still have to wait for me to get there. Like, you're only as fast as the slowest guy.
Right.
You know?
And I will tell you that it is, I don't know if every branch is like this, but it was my first. I posted a video in on the community tab, and guy named Anthony posted it about Marine Corps chow. Okay. And it got me thinking about my first morning in the chow hall. Okay. Because back then, we didn't, when we were on the ranges and stuff like that, we were eating the leftover sea rations from Vietnam. Okay. They had warehouses full of them things. And then, but I remember going into the chow hall and we were standing in line, eyes straight ahead, move when the next guy moved, and you're going up there to get your food. And you didn't have an opportunity to say, well, I'll take some of this and that. It was on your freaking plate. And it was basically boom, slap, like you see in prison movies for me back then. And so back then, if you failed out of your AIT or something like that, they recycled you, but they made you like a cook or some crap, right? And so they all had attitudes, right? And two things you didn't want to be in the military: a cook and a mechanic, because those are the two most ungrateful positions you could ever have, because nobody's happy with those bastards, right?
Right.
So I go in there and it's like, it's scrambled eggs. I said, what the hell is that white stuff they threw on there? I found out later it was called grits. And then they threw that on there and it was just on and slopped it with gravy. And I go and sit down, and because you had to put your tray down and then you had to go get your water. Okay. And then you had to come back down and stand until the table was filled. And then you sat down and ate. And so I'm sitting there eating. I'm going, holy crap. And I'm shoveling this stuff in, right? And all of a sudden, this mess sergeant comes out. You know, he's got black pants, a white shirt with his sergeant first class stripes on his collar and stuff. And he comes out there and he walks up to me. He goes, that's some damn good chow, isn't it, Private? I go, yes, Sergeant, yes, Sergeant. And all of a sudden, my drill sergeant came busting in there. You know, he goes, because I was talking with my mouth full.
Mm-hmm.
Spit it out. So I spit it out on my plate. Now you answer the sergeant. So I answered him, and he goes, what's so good about it? He goes, is it like your mom cooked? And I said, no, it's not. And he goes, what do you mean it's not? And I go, it's not. He goes, what's different? I said, the eggs aren't burnt on the bottom. My mom was a horrible cook. I'm sorry. And they started laughing. And he goes like this, and I'm looking at my plate. I just spit all this stuff back on there. Drill sergeant looked at me. He goes, well, Private, finish the plate. I learned then, peripherals. You got to make sure you see them coming, right?
Yeah.
Make sure your mouth's not full when they're coming at you. But anyway, that was my first experience in there. And I'm going to tell you something. I said this last week. After the first initial, because when you go into basic training or boot camp, I'm going to tell you, for us, it was 10 weeks. For 5 weeks, we couldn't do crap right. There was no way in heck that you could get your bay ready for inspection, and nothing was right. It was always wrong. Out on the grass, out in the sand, push-ups, 4-count flutter kicks until your stomach cramps up and stuff like that. And you get back in there. Not only do you have to clean it up again, you got to get all the sand out of there because you're covered in sand and everything. And it just went on and on. And I mean, people were, fighting in the barracks and stuff like that, yelling at each other, blaming it on somebody else. And they were watching you this whole freaking time. They know what goes on. And then you get to a point where, and I remember this because I came in the Army I was in boot camp on the 16th of July in Alabama. It is now here's a clue, guys. If you got kids or you think you're going to go in, check out when they fill basic trainings during the year and which base you're going to, because there's only 4 bases in that do basic training now in the Army. And what is that? Jackson, Fort Moore, formerly Fort Benning, Georgia, Fort Leonard Wood, and Fort Seal, Oklahoma. That's it. They had to choose the 4 worst places to go to basic training because of the humidity and the heat and all that stuff. But that's what they chose. So I was in there in July, and it was scorching hot. I'm from Arizona. It's arid. There's no humidity, right? It's just hot. And you get there, and I mean, when we went through reception and we got all our uniforms, the civilian clothes I had on was soaking wet, underwear, everything, and I had like a river of sweat running down, the crack of my butt down into my pants and shoes. And so we get all this stuff and we go back. Then they tell you to strip down and get all those civvies off. And you have to stuff all your civvies in the bag. My stuff was soaking wet. When we got done and they gave us our civvies back, I had a big furry ball of clothes inside my bag. It was just mold. The whole bag was just mold.
Yeah.
And so anyway, and then you talked about doing a bank account. Well, when I came in, you had to go see the pay officer. And you had to march over by the theater on Fort McClellan. And on the back side, in the parking lot, they had tables, and there's these warrant officers lined up. They were the pay officers. And you had to sit there, salute them, Private Mike reporting for pay as ordered. And you get your money and you have to count it and all that. Sign right here. And you got this thing. And all of a sudden you turn around and they look at you. The first time I remember getting paid. And I turn around and Psycho Drill was standing behind me. He goes, "What you gonna do with that money, Private?" I said, he goes, ain't a freaking word, rah, rah, rah. And so I'm sitting there. He made me put the money in my mouth. I'm doing push-ups on a hot asphalt ground in July in Alabama. I'm doing push-ups. And then he told me to recover, and I got back up. He goes, "What are you going to do with it?" Because I had a brain fart. I remember that you get paid before you leave the table. You unbutton your pocket, you fold it in half, and you slide it in there, and you rebutton it. Then you turn around and walk away. I said, "Man, brain fart." Okay. So, I mean, I remember all that stuff. And then when you get back, you had one drawer in your wall locker. It's a wooden wall locker thing. And it had a lock on it. And that's where you put your valuables in there. Then you had old Scruffy Nuts over here from New York. He's over there at night, got caught. He picking the locks on someone's thing and stealing money and stuff like that. Well, they caught him, because the guy that was sleeping, that it was his wall locker, he was up on the top. He came down like Dusty Rhodes and gave him, on top of the dude. And then he had him in a choke out. And he goes, and he was from Detroit. He goes, "You don't mess with Detroit." And all this, all of a sudden the drill sergeants come in because they didn't have cameras back then, but they had speakers or mics inside there, and down in the drill sergeant room, they would listen to everything that was going on. And you're going, how do these guys know this? How do they know this stuff that's going on? And I'm just like going, one drill sergeant said, "Well, my mom was a Cajun, some kind of witch doctor, and I inherited it. I know what's going on." We didn't know that. And it was just an absolutely mind game until like week 5 or week 5.5. And then all of a sudden they came in for inspection one morning, and all of a sudden they walk through and they're looking, and we know everybody's got, look where they went, look at this and that. And I'm going like this, and he's still moving. He hasn't yelled yet. Right? Then all of a sudden he gets to one thing and he sees a bunk that's not tucked correctly. The seam's not straight, and then he just goes off and he tells everybody, "Strip your beds, make them again, blah, blah, blah." And they came in later on. It's kind of like a kid waiting for a whooping when dad gets home. They're
Yeah.
crying before dad ever gets there. That's us in this room because we didn't know what kind of psychotic thing this guy was going to do to us. And they come back
Well,
in
that
there.
yeah,
And
that was
it was just from that point on, it was like going, that's it. That's it. And I'm just like going, something's going on here. And then all of a sudden the teamwork, the team building actually kicked in and you couldn't do nothing wrong after a while. And then you were marching taller. Okay. That pride set in. How they were calling you future heroes and all this stuff. I said, these kind words, it's wrong. It's wrong. You know, this is not what they're supposed to do. And it was just, I'm going, man. And it was just so good. And the day they introduced us to the firing range, I was in hog heaven. That was it for me. Guns, shooting, sitting there, and the guy that was in Vietnam telling you a story of how he shot, Charlie in the forehead at 350, yards and all this stuff, and had to be a shooter and all this kind of stuff. I'm just like going, man, you can't buy these novels. You know what I mean? And I think when we got to the shooting range and throwing hand grenades and doing all that stuff that blows stuff up and things like that, I just got into it like nobody's business. That's when I knew I found a home. I had food. I had three hots and a cot, and I got to shoot guns, at week 5, and I can't do nothing wrong now. It's crazy, but it's just, it was for me hell at the beginning, and it was so satisfying at the end. It really was.
Yeah, and once you realize that, and there was a group of us in my platoon that had figured out that boot camp was all about a schedule, which, now I know, hey, there's a training schedule, right? But obviously when you're there as a recruit trying to go through, training and become a Marine, you don't understand that it's a schedule. It's just chaos to you. You're like, wait a minute, what is going on? But then after about week 3 or 4, a lot of us had picked up that, guess what? We're getting up, reveilles at the same time every morning. And, the routine, hey, we're going to chow, we're going to PT, we're doing, the only thing that changed from day to day was that period of instruction that you were getting, whether it was military history, formations, military terminology, whatever it was. That was the only thing that changed. But the schedule itself, even though we weren't allowed to wear watches, and our only day off, like that was something for us. Well, let me back up because I'd seen people talk about comments in here. Was the chow hall experience. So the chow hall was easy for me because I was a fast eater anyways. And the rule was, the drill instructors came in last to get chow, and they would sit at the head of the table. You had your, all the recruits were at theirs. Yep. The drill instructor sat up at the head table. They would go through last. So if you were one of the first ones in, no problem. You're going to get your chow. You have plenty of time to, if you're a slow eater. But that drill instructor got his food. He sat down, and it was, straight out of, what is that movie, Major Payne, where it just turn on the Hoover, right?
Yeah.
There's no chewing. It doesn't hit the teeth. It's just straight in the mouth and down the throat. And so there was a lot of guys that weren't able to eat because they were slow eaters. They didn't figure that out. And then what threw me off was we would have recruits that would have this extra little tag. Like nobody really had tags unless, something was wrong with you. But they had to have this tag hanging off their blouse button, whether they were a double ration or a half ration. Yeah. And, of course, when me coming through, I didn't have a tag. But if you came in and you were real skinny, you got double rations, and they would make you sit there and eat every bit of it. Yeah. And I'd seen people talking about where they gained 20 or 30 pounds for being at boot camp.
Yeah.
But then the opposite was if you came in bigger, then you got half rations. So you got half of what everybody else got, and that's all you got. And those guys were the ones that kind of private pile crying because they're hungry and they need, but you've got, the military has height, weight standards, and you have to be within them.
Yeah.
And they're going to get you, especially in the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps is very, very big about image. If you're not that lean, green fight machine, you effed up. We're going to make you pay.
Right.
And so it really wasn't a weird experience for me because I was used to eating fast anyways. And even though I was quite a bit of the time towards the end of the line, but I was like, all right, fine, whatever. I'm still going to be done with my food. Like sometimes it was actually more than what I wanted to eat.
Right.
But you ate anyways because you knew you were going to burn that energy and calories to go through. And then, so going back to, we figured out our schedule. And so we were trying to we would have like certain down times where if you're down, you're either sitting on your Foot Locker and writing a letter to home or you're cleaning your weapon. And then as it progressed, it was like, okay, you could be polishing your boots because we were still at the point where you had to have boot polish and spit shine your boots.
Right.
And, even if you weren't polishing the ones that you were physically wearing, you spent a lot of time polishing the ones for your, dress inspection uniforms. And then all of our emblems, which once you get to the fleet, hey, you find out I can buy anodized emblems.
Yeah.
But you don't get those in boot camp. You get the brass ones that you're out
you
there
get
with the
brasso, and that's it.
And a rag, and you're polishing all the belt buckles, your tie clasp, all of your emblems, getting everything to a mirror shine. So we tried jumping the gun. We're like, hey, our weapons are clean. We know, so there would always be a recruit or two that was brave enough to be like, can these recruits start field daying now? And they're like, oh man, it would piss the drill instructors off so bad. They're like, oh, and they would go off because they're like, can I do my job? Like they were mad that we figured this out. Because it's like, hey, just do what you're told. Like just be a monkey and follow a line and do. But we were trying to get ahead of it. We're like, hey, if we can do this a little early, maybe we get a couple extra minutes at the end of the day to write, an extra letter home or something. Because we didn't get time off. Sunday was the closest you could have to time off. And the only reason was you basically had two options. You either stayed at the squad bay and worked on your laundry, which we found out real quick was it's better to just wash your own laundry out in the squad bay, the big wash bins outside, than to send it off. Because if you send it off, I don't know, they never took them, the mesh laundry bags. You would put all your dirty clothes in there. Well, they never took them out of that bag to wash them.
No, they washed them in and dried them in the bag.
And somehow, some way, you would get them back, and your socks went from, hey, these fit adults to now they'll fit my toddler. And so I don't know what kind of the sun they harnessed into their dryers to make everything shrink so bad.
Yeah.
And so it only took some of us one or two tries of, we're not sending our laundry off anymore. We'll just go out there on Sunday, because you could either go do your laundry on Sunday, which they still allotted people, or you could go to church.
Yeah.
And they had, I don't know, 3 or 4 different, religious services on Sundays.
Right.
So a lot of people found God, or at least found a church. Let me put it that way. They found a church on Sunday during boot camp because that was the only time.
Your only release.
Right. You weren't going to get yelled and screamed at a lot of times.
Yeah.
That's they would have the local newspaper or some newspapers or something. You could read something other than, we had a book, and it's called your knowledge.
Right.
And it's all the Marine Corps knowledge, all the stuff in classes they're going to teach you in boot camp. And, that was the only thing you were allowed to read, unless you were on private time, which was maybe a half hour a day that you might be able to read a letter from home or something. But that was the point when we found the whole Mount Suribachi method. And they would come in and we would do, a great field day, right? Get everything clean, everything squared away, all the racks are made, they're tight, everything's good to go. And next thing you know, they're like, all right, everybody get outside. And we'd go stand in a formation outside, and it just a tornado goes off in the squad bay. The racks are flipped. Your foot lockers, if they weren't locked, sorry about your luck, because everything that was in it, it got made into a mound that would touch the ceiling, because we had, I think it was 3 stories in our barracks. And, luckily, well, somewhat luckily for us, we were on the first, so we didn't have to go up and downstairs. But it would touch the ceiling.
Everybody's stuff was all together.
Everybody's stuff, everything they could grab, racks were flipped over, your bedding all ripped off, and then they come back in and be like, good, you got 10 minutes to fix it and be right back to inspection ready. So you're scrambling. Well, guess what? You didn't make it in 10 minutes.
No. Yeah.
Back outside, right back to it. And so you had to kind of learn to play a little bit of those mind games, but that's what broke a lot of guys. Yeah. And and it's a weeding out process, as vicious as it sounds sometimes, to people that didn't go through it. But do you want the person that can't stand getting yelled at to be the person that's got your back in a firefight?
Yeah.
And so when they start putting that perspective down to you, and I really enjoyed the time because we had one senior drill instructor, and then I think three what they call the green hats, the little bulldog ones, right? So your senior always come in and you would get some time, sometimes every night or whatever it was, he'd come in, and that's when you got your mail, and he would he talked to you like you were actually human for once.
Right.
And you're like, whoa, wait a minute, and then the other guys would come out and yell and scream at you when he was done. So you were like, all right, now I feel a little more normal. This is okay.
Yeah.
Don't go back and forth on me. It just, but the worst, and I know we're going over on time, but we've talked, so the difference for us too, and I'd seen Dawn was in here. I don't know if she's still in, but so Dawn definitely has an experience a little bit different because, Dawn being a female Marine, she went to Parris Island, and they had that, but that was the only duty station for the female Marines.
Okay.
And I actually had a chance.
Yeah, that's where my niece went to.
Yeah. All female Marines always went to Parris Island. That's the only female recruit. Now, I've heard that they've changed it, and now they have them at both. I haven't looked into it enough because it doesn't affect me right now, but I heard that they've changed it where they can go to both. But I went to a boot camp graduation for one of my stepbrother's fiance at the time. She joined the Marine Corps, and I went there and watched it, and I seen Parris Island. And when my recruiter was like, hey, you have a choice, I'm like, send me to California, because I've been down in mosquito heaven, and I don't want, Parris Island's in a swamp.
Yeah.
There's Dawn. She said this year they started going to both. So
what was your favorite part? And it could be anything of boot camp. And what was your worst part?
So my favorite part was when we transitioned. So being in San Diego and being in the heart of San Diego, we couldn't do weapons training there. You could carry your rifles, you could clean them, you could learn them, but you couldn't do any shooting or live fire. So what they do is they pack all your stuff up, put you on buses again, and ship you to Camp Pendleton. And being at Camp Pendleton was the funnest part for me, because at Camp Pendleton is where you got the rifle range. That's where you went to the grenade range. That's where you learned all the field training. And that's where, what you did in San Diego was kind of like the admin, history, educational, how to drill, how to march, how to do that kind of stuff, the fancy, pretty stuff. Camp Pendleton is where you did the nitty gritty. That's where you got to get dirty. And so I think my greatest part was honestly is I remember my 18th birthday, I was in boot camp and I was at the rifle range shooting that day.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how better does it? I mean, how gooder does it get? Like I'm just turning 18 and I'm out here shooting rifles all day long. Like,
yeah,
I'm living what had been my dream since middle school, and now I'm out here doing it.
Yeah.
And then, the other part there, which, I know some of them in here, the older generation of Marines, they didn't have what we have now is the Crucible, which was the Crucible for.
Isn't
for
it like you're in bivouac?
It is. That's basically the end culmination of all of it coming together.
Yeah.
So you spend, what is it? Like 3 days, something like that. You have, limited. I have one or two MREs, something like that. I can't remember all the exact details, but you've got limited food. But that's where you do all the team building, and you're coming together. You get the long hikes, but at the end of the Crucible, there's always either a really long march, because like Dawn, anybody on Parris Island, it was all flat land. So they would march for miles. Well, being at Pendleton, we had mountains. So we hiked mountains, which I wasn't mad at either. That was pretty awesome to experience, camping outside, is what I called it. But under the stars and, in the mountains.
So how long was your final march?
I don't remember how far we marched on the final.
Ours back then was a 12-mile force march with full ruck and all that stuff. Like that. But what was your worst experience?
Probably the worst part was being at the rifle range and not the rifle range itself. It's just this specific event. So we'd been spending weeks now practice firing, doing all the drills. And the drill instructors, they basically told us before in our very first rifle class, they're like, how many of you have shot guns before? Raise your hand. So and they said, good. All of you are going to be the ones that are going to fail. We're like, what do you mean? We've shot before. And it made sense because, now you're getting an M16. It's got adjustable sights. It's not your daddy's 12 gauge where Kentucky windage. Yeah. And so in that statement did turn out very true for a lot of individuals. For me, it didn't. I actually shot better because now I could move the sights to where now that gun shot where I pointed it. Like the whole concept theory behind it was great. So we come up on our first set of qualification days, and you've got to shoot. You've got a morning and an afternoon relay, right? So you're pulling targets, in the morning, and then you shoot in the afternoon, and vice versa. So because them targets aren't automated. There's people down there raising and lowering them and putting the shot things in there. So I was a morning relay recruit, shot a pretty good high score. And, great. They're like, cool, go hang out in the bleachers. You guys did what you were asked to do. We've got enough working party in the pits. We don't need you. Like, hang out. So, great. Finally, kind of like a reward, right? No. That lasted all of 5 minutes. And we were sitting up there just minding our own business, finally relaxing. And, yeah, we went on an island hopping campaign. So there was a sand pit, an IT pit outside of every barracks. For the entire rest of the day, while everybody else was still trying to get everybody to qualify, those of us who qualified went island hopping and hit every sand pit that they could run us to. And every exercise known to man, we're doing it in the sand, just getting thrashed. And I was just thinking in my head the whole time, I'm like, I did exactly what they wanted me to do. I shot a high expert. I qualified, and now I'm getting punished. I don't like. It was a moment of just. That was probably the only time that I really hated being there. And then everybody qualified, and we went back to it, and the proudest moment I would say, specific moment, was at the end of the Crucible. You climb to the top of the mountain after the forced hike. You're in all your gear. You did all this stuff. You're starving. They have a huge buffet up there for you. But the biggest thing was that's when you get your first EGA, Eagle, Globe, and Anchor.
It's touching, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but that's the point. When that goes in your hand, you're no longer a recruit, you're a Marine.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I can hear it in your voice, bro.
Yeah, it's and they played, what is the song they played?
Anchors Away. I'm just kidding.
No, you would think they would play the Marines hymn, Anchors Away. They would play, it was Proud to Be an American by
Lee Greenwood.
Yes. So they have that playing over the loudspeakers, and you go through it, and I remember, one of my drill instructors that as they're going through, because they hand it to you, and then they'll give you a couple words of encouragement or whatever, congratulate, and he had looked at me and he said, "You're going to do really well in the Marine Corps," and I'm just like, I didn't even think he knew who I was, and
yeah.
Lo and behold, I was able to make a career of it, and
wow,
did fairly well for myself. But yeah, that was.
I'm going to tell you that the worst part of basic. Well, I'll tell you what the best part of it was the day and night land navigation, because I was a Boy Scout and I learned everything they taught us. I learned already. And you had all these guys that were coming in, and I never said nothing. So then they break you up in 3-man teams, and you go out. Well, also we come in, and we hit every spot because you got to get that clip thing and stamp your card, and you have to hit each station. And there's 10 stations, and it's like a 12 mile. And you got to hit them in the order that they did it, that they put them on the sheets and stuff. And so I knocked them all out. One guy couldn't freaking hardly read. The other guy didn't know what the hell was going on. And so I'm sitting there and I'm getting my protractor out. I'm doing all this stuff. And I start plotting every one of the positions. And I'm going, okay. But we got to hit this position. We're starting here. We got to get this one that's way over here, but this one's right here. Why don't we just do this? And we did it that way. And I plotted it out. We hit every last one of them. We came in. It was like an hour and 25 minutes before the next group even came in. Right. And then it was late at night when the rest of them came in. They took all day out there, and some of them came in on trucks, because they were so lost, and then I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, man, we beat everybody here. My other two guys were so happy and everything. And then here came the hammer. I did exactly what they told me not to do. It says in order. And I did it by the fastest route because I'm an individual. Okay. I don't follow instructions, right? So then it's night land navigation, and they give you a brand new card and you're in a different area. And we did the same thing. We plotted them all out, and I said, okay, we're going to do it in order. Again, we come in the middle of the night. I mean, it's dark 30 out there, but we come in and we're in like 2 hours before anybody else. Now you go, guys, sit down, relax, right? So we sit there and relax. And the next thing I know, he goes, where did you learn that? I said, you taught us in class. He looked at me, he goes, BS. I won't say what he said. He said, BS. Where'd you learn it? I said, I learned it as a Boy Scout. Right? And he goes, good Boy Scout. And then he called me Boy Scout the rest of the time. And then he goes, go out there and find these clowns and take these two scrubs with you. You guys couldn't find your way out of a wet paper bag if you tried. Right? And so we went out there and we were finding people, and we got in, the sun was rising, and we still hadn't found everybody. Right? So it kind of made me feel good that I learned something and I brought something in there and stuff like that, but I still got belittled because of it. So
Yeah.
I enjoyed that, right? The worst part was we went for bivouac, what you call the crucible, and when you go out there and you do all your drills, you're digging foxholes, you're doing all that stuff, setting up perimeters, you're doing all that stuff, right? And the my battle buddy laid his weapon against a tree, and he was doing something. I think he was, because we used pup tents. One partner had one half, you had the other half.
Oh, the shelter
Put it
half.
together
Yeah.
and yeah. And so he left it there, and he goes, all of a sudden we heard the clanging because it was chow time. He goes, I'll get yours if you finish this up. I said, okay. So he grabbed, left his M6, his M5, AR-14 leaned up against a tree. And I'm over there doing this. I got mine on my back. You don't lose that. All of a sudden, drill sergeant comes up, right, and grabs it. He goes, Private, where's your weapon? I said, it's right here. And I looked at it because my partner's was a version. Mine was black and his was gray, right? So they could tell whose weapon was whose. And shit hit the fan, dude. It went crazy. It was the worst time because if he messes up, I messed up, right? We're over there on latrine duty, okay? We did latrine duty. We had to clean up after each meal while we're on bivouac and all that stuff for the week. And then part of that bivouac, when you got done with that, then you went into what's called common task testing, where it's a book about yay thick, and it has every duties and responsibility of a soldier under every condition. It has your general orders in there, when you're on guard duty, all that stuff is in there. And at the end of it, you had 12 stations, and you didn't know which of the 12 out of the book they were going to pick. And in order to get to graduation, you had to pass each and every one of those. Dude, that first part, then it got to that was terrifying. I can reciting stuff back then, I couldn't tell you. Remember, 897 in my graduating class, that was my number out of 1,500. So I wasn't smart and I wasn't stupid. I was on the verge of, psychotic, behavior right there. I'm in the middle, and so I'm just like, well, that scared me. It scared me so bad. I'm sitting there and I pass them because you got to stay in that line, read that whole section again, go back up there and test again. I got to the general orders, right? And I got the first one down. I got the second one down. And the third one was just playing heck on me. It was the longest one. I couldn't remember it. And I'm sitting there and they're yelling at me and I'm trying to read it. And, this is it. You're recycling. And they told me I was recycling back to day one.
No.
Dude, my gut was so thick. I pooped my pants right there. It was down my legs. I said, that was my basic training nightmare because I had to march in formation and they put me at the front. So it drifted back. Dude, that was horrifying for me. And I'm going to tell you something that I don't think that, there's a few things like pooping on myself. I'd change that. But I wouldn't change the experience for nothing in this world. I think it made me the patriot that I believe I am. It made me a team player. It made me look after my battle buddy. It made me a better leader later on, because leaders aren't born, they're made. Okay.
Yes.
You either are or you're not. And that's why some people move up the chain and some people don't. Sometimes your MOS is so full that you can't move up, and but your soldiers are the ones who, for me, my soldiers, what they thought of me was ultimately the most important thing in my life, because they were my ride or dies. You go to combat, they're your ride or dies. And hopefully you train them to the standard. Hopefully they're in it for the same reason and stuff like that. Did we go to combat and we had some slugs? Yeah, we had the people in the overweight program. They were going to kick them out. Then we go to Desert Storm. And oh, by the way, they're good enough to go to combat. When we got back, they were still fat, and they still kicked them out right after that. Okay. But it was just, I wouldn't change anything,
and I would agree with you there. You have conversations, especially after boot camp, and you're going through and you're like, man, if I could go back, I would blah, blah, blah. But, it's a good thing that it's like a one-shot deal, right?
Yeah.
Because you're only going to be able to experience it that way, that one time. Because if you go back with more knowledge, well, now you're going to be too confident and cocky to actually pay attention and be that team player, right? Because now you're going to go back and you're going to be that individual that they don't want you to be, because you're like, well, I already know this and I already know that. And we've seen it a little bit with the recycled Marines or recruits, because like we had ones that, if they failed for one reason, a lot of it was medical. Like if they got hurt and it was something that they could rehabilitate there, then they would put them in that medical platoon and rehabilitate them. And I think we had one or two that ended up coming to us. And the one guy, I think he had been to medical, like MRP, 3 times.
Wow.
Because he went in, he got hurt, and then he rehabilitated, was going with another, because now he's with a totally another platoon, starts doing training there, gets something else hurt, goes back to MRP. Like, we were his last chance for him to be able to finish out and graduate. And he did. He graduated with us, but like that was his last chance to be able to do it. Right. But I mean, he'd been there. Like, we were looking at it, we're like, man, 13 weeks, we've been here for 17 years. Like, this is forever. I couldn't imagine. And that was something that I didn't think about it like super active, but it was always in the back of my mind was, especially when we were doing a lot of the forced marches and, at Camp Pendleton, and nothing is flat. You're going up the hills. And I remember just about every single forced march that we did with our rucksacks, I had a second one because one of the other guys was falling out.
Yeah.
So I always had to do them with 2, because like you've got people helping him get along, because you can't leave anybody behind, but you can't leave the gear behind either. So it's like, all right, let's spread load the gear. And I just always happen to be that guy that they're like, well, you look like a pack mule. Cool. Throw it on there. And, but it was like, I dreaded the moment, and I was glad of my physical abilities to be able to do that, because if I couldn't, and I would have gotten hurt because I was doing something for somebody else, which was my character anyways.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't want to go back and do it again. Like,
I think the worst people that we had were people, because back then you couldn't be older than 34 or something like that, because you had to be I don't remember what the number was. But we had guys that were in their 30s, and we absolutely hated them, because they were like, they thought they were know-it-alls and this and that, and they were the shithouse lawyer giving you advice because they were the older people and stuff like that.
Right.
And those are the ones, some of them, they went in there and they just kicked ass, and some of them gone. you know. And I think because they had families, and I mean, a couple of guys, you could hear them cry at night, and you're just like going, dude, you're a grown ass man. Why are you crying? I miss my family and this and that. I didn't have no family to miss, you know, and that's why it's good to go in when you're young. But if you got a full blown family, children and stuff, and now you had no place to go, and they would take you because you met the age restriction and stuff like that. I mean, that's got to be hard. Plus, if you've never been away from your family,
Yeah.
you know, I see all these wilderness shows and stuff like that. They're grown men. I'm a wilderness survivalist, prepper, and they get out there, and 10 days later they're crying like babies because number one, they're starving to death. Number two, they let them take a picture of their kids or their wife, and they just sit there and cry because they miss them because they've never had this separation like this. It's one thing to be out in the field with a bunch of guys and stuff like that, but to be alone, you know, and really you're preparing for that one moment where you could be alone. And that, to me, when you're in the military and you're in a combat zone and you're alone, that ain't good. That ain't good, you know, because you're so dependent on the team. And that's what they instill in you in basic training is the team concept. You know, your ride or dies. And that is, as I can tell you something, I tell people this all the time. You will never you can have friends all your life, but that bond that you've made with the people that you grew up with, meaning in the military, that will never, ever go away. And when you meet somebody, they ain't a stranger to you. I don't care. If you're in the Walmart and you walk across the thing because you see somebody with the USS Red Skelton or whatever the hell the name of the ships are and shit like that, all you have to do is see that. Okay? Just see that. And that brings pride to me that when I see these old codgers walking around and they're still wearing their hats and their VFW hats and all that kind of stuff, it just, oh man, it's still there. And my fear is that we have not, except for the Marine Corps, they made it by 14 recruits. They made their commitment to recruiting, okay, this last year. And I think the Army was like 100 and something thousand away from it. It was crazy that people don't want to go in to the military. Why? Because they went through the COVID and what we did to our soldiers, Marines, Air Force, everybody about the COVID shot. And I'm sorry, but that's one of the reasons they're not going in. And that, number two is they don't trust the government, you know, and they got this whole agenda going on now. People are looking at everything different. But let me tell you something. We're going to need those people. Okay. Something's got to change where patriotism comes back, because I'm going to tell you something. If you look around the world, things doesn't look good and it could get worse. And who's going to do it? Everybody protesting. They're not going to do nothing. And what happens when they instill the draft back? Those are the guys that they're going to force to go in there, and you're going to get a warrior out of that guy or gal or whatever.
Yeah, and
that's the scary part for me.
I think the hardest, when you have a conversation with people and they bring up like, oh, well, they should just bring the draft back and do this, and most of the time, the people that are okay with doing a draft are ones that didn't serve.
That's right.
They weren't, because if you look at the caliber of people and take Vietnam, and those guys had it hard. I mean, I'll tell you, I've never been so grateful.
They had it the worst.
Because, not only did they just go over to a shit show, but then they came home to a shit show. And, there was nothing good about any of that whole like era time of those things going on. But then you look at the draft and you go over, and then when you start talking to people that were there, right, and the things that they talk about that went on while they were in Vietnam, the abuse, the drug use. I mean, how whacked out of their mind, you know, when they were all hopped up on everything they could get their hands on, you know, and you look at those situations and the, you know, the theft and all that kind of stuff. Like, those are the people that's that group of the judge said, hey, go to prison or go to the service. Well, send them to prison, judge. Do not send them to the service. The military needs to be, no matter what the branch is, it needs to be. That's why there's regulations. That's why there's, you know, standards that have to be met in order for them to join whatever branch that they're going to join, because we want the best of the best of our general population, because we know that there's people out there that aren't capable of doing it.
Right.
You know, we've seen it a lot in the comments tonight. You know, and I know a lot of, like, Devil Dog's been throwing stuff, you know, comments all night long that, you know, and obviously he went through before I did, but it's a lot of the same stuff, the terms that, you know, there's a history that goes along with that we have the responsibility to carry on. But how do you do that with today's society and generation, you know, when they want everything given to them?
Yeah.
And they want, you know, but they don't want to do anything for it. It's like, no, you don't. But, and so it puts us as a society as a whole in a major disadvantage right now.
Right.
Because, you know, the quality of the fighting force, you know, because if they're lower in the standard, like I know you were talking about the other day, was, you know, oh, they're gonna waive. They're waiving the high school diploma, which honestly, the ASVAB is based off the education at an 8th grade level.
Right.
It really is. So the experience that you get, you know, a high school diploma, does that really qualify? Like, I think it's more of an age and maturity thing, than to say, hey, it's a high school diploma that you need. Like, all right, let's keep it at 18, right? Because now you're a legal adult. You can sign for yourself. You could do those things. But I know 30-year-olds that aren't mature enough to be able to handle that kind of responsibility too. But that's where the standards come in. If you're not able to pass these initial criteria, then you've got to get out. And, you know, an answer to get more people, I mean, it's scary. It really is, because we've got all of our generations before us that are allowing us, you know, through all the trials and tribulations and battles that they've fought. And, you know, a vast majority had gave their life for us to have the freedoms for you and I to sit here and talk about our experience.
Exactly.
You know, you know, and I knew quite a few that served an entire career and never went to any kind of combat campaign.
Right. I know a few of those. Yeah.
You know, and
I wasn't one of them. And it was like, don't get stationed with that guy. You're going to get deployed. You know what I mean? It's like going, what the heck? Because there was one time, I mean, I was in Europe for 16 years, and 8 of those years, off and on, I was deployed somewhere. Right? I mean, two tours in Iraq. I did Operation Provide Comfort in the mountains when they were gassing the Kurds. I did two tours in Bosnia, and then the Czech Republic, and I think it was the Czech Republic and Poland joined NATO at the very end. And then we had to do military to military, and we left all our equipment there. That was part of them, you know, because you have to give, every country has to give so much to a country, and we gave it in equipment. And we went there and trained all their people and stuff like that. And then, of course, down in Panama with 5th Infantry Division when we went after Noriega. And so it is just, you know, there is, and people had this stigma that if you didn't go into combat, you didn't, you know, because when they take your DA photo, it's always on your combat shoulder, and they could see your combat patch and stuff like that. They didn't care about your unit patch or nothing like that. So it was just the things, and I always got disappointed because I always told myself I never want to go back to a country that I got deployed to. And Iraq was a double deployment, and Bosnia was a double deployment, and it was just, but that's for another show on deployments and stuff when we get down the road. Next week, we're going to be talking about our individual training, our MOS training, and stuff like that. And we're going to tell you about how many different MOSs there are, how many careers you can go into, what our career fields we're all about, and stuff like that. And then we're moving to that to duty stations and so on throughout the careers and stuff like that. But each night's going to be another step in becoming a soldier, a Marine, Air Force. So if you want to be on the show and you want to talk about your branch and be part of this conversation, like I told everybody, we're not going to we're on a time restraint on how long we're going to talk about something. When it gets over, it gets over. And we're going to keep the conversations going. But if you want to be on here, check our descriptions, our about page, and contact either Jason or myself, and we'll work it in so you can come up on the show and be part of the conversation. Next week, MOSs, our career field that we went into, and then we'll go over how many different career fields there truly are in the military. So, any closing remarks for you, Jason?
Just appreciate every one of you as always. And David Moffat, I know he did send me an email. I'll get back with you, David, about him coming up one night. I think
Sure.
For us, it's kind of get through. I guess my idea is us getting through our personal, like what we did, kind of getting that out there, and then we start working guests in. Even if we're going back to a previous subject, but I think
Sure.
for the level of it. But we appreciate every single one of you, and glad that you can be out here once again. Share it out, guys. We know that there's a whole lot more vets out there that would, and families of vets that would love to just listen to this conversation.
If you've got a community page, please post our videos on there, invite people in. We want to get to those vets. We want to hear their stories. We want them in the chat, part of our family. Hey, guys, this is, if it's helping anybody, then we're doing our job. It's helping me as a former soldier, a veteran right now. And one of these days, we're going to get to the VA and we're going to let them have it too, because we both experienced those guys. Okay. So, hey, guys, if you're out there and you see a vet, thank a vet at all times. They're the reason we live in this beautiful country. Hey, I'm glad you're my battle buddy. It's good to see you every week. And I hope everybody joins us next week for MOS, Advanced Individual Training. Okay. Love you guys. We'll see you on the next video. Bye, guys.
See you guys. Huh?